What's going on, everybody? Figured I'd make another video. It's been a while, and this one will cover the LSX Sorento, some details about it, what's going on with it, and why it looks so damn bad. So just sit back and check it out. We'll cover everything and answer some questions maybe people have had, and cover all about the swap. So for the interior, everything is pretty much stock except for the gauges. These are speed HUD gauges. They are the CAN controlled gauges, so that basically you just plug the gauge, the main gauge, which is the speedo, you plug that into the OBD port, and then once that's plugged into the OBD port, it communicates kind of through a headphone jack to all the other gauges except for the tach, because this one's directly wired from the tach output on the LS ECU. The shifter is the factory shifter, factory selection, and everything works normally. Ironically, the actual shift distance is lined up perfectly with the transmission that's in this. All I had to do is make a shift arm for the transmission that was the right length, so that the throw from park to drive was the required amount for it to reach park to drive on the transmission. Right now, it's not wired for tap shift, but I can do some work on a CAN bus card for an Arduino, so I can use the tap shift with this basic setup that's on here, the factory tap shift. So we can put it over here and shift up and down, and it'll actually work. But unfortunately, on this transmission, the truck transmission programming, it doesn't have direct wire tap shift, so you actually have to run it through a CAN bus card, and I'm working on figuring all that stuff out. The throttle pedal that's in here is from a Corvette. It's the entire throttle pedal assembly, and it comes when you buy a throttle position sensor. It actually comes with the whole pedal, the steel arm, and the position sensor. And I basically use this setup because with drive-by-wire, all you got to do is drill a couple holes, bolt this assembly in, and for mine I had to bend the pedal assembly. I actually just cut it, bend it, and welded it back because it's actually pretty thick, so it makes it hard to just bend without any equipment. And it made it easier because with a couple of cuts I could bend it into shape while it was installed in the car. So actually it's perfect throw. And worked out perfectly. So the engine itself is an LY6 engine. It's a 6-liter 4th gen. Came out of an 09 Silverado 2500 HD, along with the transmission. The transmission is a 6L90E, which is the 6-speed, extremely heavy-duty transmission, full electronic controlled. It's got its own transmission control module that's actually in the pan, and then this has a separate ECU. Some things about the engine: it's got the same cylinder heads as a LS3. Those are the rectangle port heads. The only difference is that this doesn't have the sodium-filled valves. To get it in the Kia, just a few things. It was pretty easy. I had to make some mounts, cut the factory ones off. Kind of tough to see, but you can kind of see maybe a little bit. There we go, maybe better. I cut the factory mounts off for the Kia 3.8, and then used some cardboard to make a template that lined up with where the engine brackets were. Then made it out of steel and welded everything all together. To using the Corvette engine mounts and then the rubber isolator mounts to get everything in there. The headers are GTO shorty headers. They used to have a 2.5-inch flange, but I cut it off before the flange so that I could keep the 3-inch pipe. And that goes the 2-inch flange was right about here, so cut that off, and then used the 3-inch pipe welded on there to wrap around to get the shape I needed, because this side wasn't too bad, although I did have to cut the headers underneath on the bottom, pie cut them, and then bend them in because they actually were contacting the piece of frame right here. The other side, I didn't have to do anything, it actually just fits in there perfectly, but the steering shaft is right there, and that, let's see, there we go. Steering shaft kind of made it hard, so I had to get that pipe and I snaked it around the steering shaft and kept it tight to the block and made that fit in there all nice. Pretty close to the engine, but it clears. Helps with the exhaust wrap to keep everything from getting hot. Coil packs and everything, those are from the LY6. The intake is an LS3 because it does bolt right on, so I bought the entire intake, manifold assembly, fuel injectors and everything, throttle body, all that because the truck one was busted when I got it from the junkyard. It is drive-by-wire like I showed you inside. It was super easy. A lot of guys don't like the drive-by-wire. I don't know if they think it's more complicated. You know, there's that, and then people say that it's not as responsive, but the responsiveness can be taken care of tuning, so it works just as responsive as a cable. But I mean, you just hooked up, you know, a few wires in your to your ECU like it was in the harness, and then a few wires to the pedal, and it made it super easy. This actually had a drive-by-wire setup from the factory, and actually kept the factory drive-by-wire wiring, and just tied the Corvette pedal to the factory wires, and then where it ran into the ECU, I just pulled those and ran them through. So, because there was already wires back to where the ECU is mounted for the factory setup. So, fuel system just has an upgraded pump. I got that from AirTex. Those guys are amazing. They helped me out with exactly what I needed. Just sent them an email. So that's got an upgraded pump. And then they get rid of the factory Kia fuel pressure regulator is built into the fuel sending unit. Got rid of that, plugged it off so it wouldn't work, and then running a fuel pressure regulator in the front. It's all braided stainless fuel line to it. The stack factory stuff would have been fine, I'm sure, but it was just easy to run a better braided line and didn't have to worry about anything ever rusting or having any problems. The front truck, the brackets are truck brackets. I think I got it from like a 5.3 van or something like that from the junkyard. Same, you know, the alternator's the same. Water pump is a 2010 Camaro water pump, and I use this pump because it has this outlet right here. It's got a front-facing outlet. The one that was on this engine came straight up and actually hit the throttle body, so I couldn't use it. Plus, the 2010 Camaro water pump uses spaced away more for the VVT cover, so I didn't have to use like spacers or anything for a different water pump. It was already spaced far enough away from the block to clear the VVT cover. Oh, the oil pan was that was a tough one. I went through a bunch of oil pans. Maybe I'll throw some pictures up. The oil pan was from a GTO. It's the front sump pan. It took a lot of work going through different pans trying to see what would fit and how much clearance I'd have, but I ended up with the front sump GTO pan, and I still had to cut it and modify it to clear the front differential. That caused some pain in the butt, you know, to cut it and weld it, because at the time I didn't have any welding equipment for that. The radiator and fan assembly is factory from the Kia. It was a really big radiator, so far it's kept it cool enough. I do have some room, as you can see on the sides, where I'll probably go with a different radiator just to get it even better for cooling. I have few surprises lined up for this, including the LSA supercharger. For the fan, I couldn't just wire in reverse and then have it push, because this used to be a cooler fan. It's actually got a wild blade design in there, so it really only moves in one direction air-wise. I mean, it'll push a little bit of air when it's going backwards, but nothing like what it does, you know, driving the correct direction. So I actually had to flip the fan on the hub, and yeah, you can't really see in there, but it's turned around on there so that actually is now a proper pusher fan. The radiator is moved down and forward. It used to be, those brackets used to be basically up here back some. So it's like right here. Now they're down and forward to get the radiator under the actual core support. I'm using these hoses. I can't remember who made them. I got them from Summit. If I can find them again, I'll throw a card up or something to show you where I got them. I'm not impressed. Yeah, they're flexible and they're, you know, they work really well, but this red came off them so quickly. It did not hold very good at all. You know, they barely, I don't even think it lasted like a month with the red on there, and it all started flaking off. The power steering system on this is the factory from the truck I actually got this bracket from for the accessory mount. Factory Kia reservoir though, and to get that together all I did was buy a couple AN adapter fittings and run that Teflon line braided stainless AN line to the factory rack, and everything hooked up. Down there is the transmission cooler and then the little power steering cooler loop. This is the factory style stuff. For the wiring harness, I built the harness myself. Everything was pretty straightforward. The way these harnesses are designed, the only thing I had to do was add a couple relays for the ignition and fuel, and a fuse for the same setup, because this one, the 3.8, had everything wired into one. It was I believe it was ignition coils, and then the fuel injectors were on a separate one at a lower amp rating than what the LS had, because this runs at a bank. So you have coil packs and injectors for each bank tied together power-wise for each, and those had a higher fuse rating than what the Kia could use. So instead of messing around with that, I used the Kia's factory harness to drive those relays for the fuel and ignition relay, and then a larger fuel setting. So the rest of the fuses all go through the factory fuse box. O2 sensor, mass airflow sensor, map sensor, all those are wired to where they would be per se in the Kia's harness. Just looking at the diagram, you know, it would be like, for example, I think it was emissions 1 fuse or something like that, and that emissions 1 fuse had certain things on it, and I just took the same parts on the LS, you know, into consideration and wired them into the fuse. Now the transfer case is a Jeep NP231 transfer case, and that's mounted on there with a custom billet aluminum adapter that a friend of mine made that has a shop. It used to be a advanced adapters adapter, but it's junk. I had issues with it, and it broke and tore away from it because of the machining was so narrow in some spots. So a friend of mine built me the aluminum billet adapter, and we went with that. It's got a custom drive shaft that's kind of ghetto homemade. That's one thing I want to get done so I can actually do some serious pulls and stuff on this. I want to have it legitimately made. And then it's got the factory rear Kia differential. The rear diff is pretty stout. It's larger than a Ford 9-inch. It has some huge gears in it. The bearings are the same as a Dodge 3500 to 5500 rear end bearings. I looked it up on Rock Auto, and you can do a cross-reference, and that's what it said were the cross-reference exact part numbers for those Dodge full-size mega trucks. So that was pretty cool. It does have a Nitrex triple threat wet kit on it that can be jetted to 300 horsepower. It was made by DEI, and they stopped making it, unfortunately, because it's an amazing nitrous kit. But it's not finished yet. I just have to plug in the harness here to the piece that's going to come out of the car, because it really isn't perfectly tuned to run without the nitrous yet, let alone with the nitrous. So once I have it tuned, I'll have it tuned for the nitrous. The intake that's on here is from a 1500 Chevy truck with a 6-liter, which they did make, which was kind of cool, because I was trying to find something. I needed a really tight 90-degree bend, and it was the only one I found that had such a really tight bend to clear everything. So that worked out great. These hoses are the heater core hoses. they worked out really well. They're similarly flexible to the pipes that I use for the radiator, but they actually, the red hasn't come off of them. They've been really good compared to those other hoses. It was just something that worked out really well. It was really easy, that it was bendable, and they're flexible stainless, so routing it to where I needed it to go was really easy. So why does it look so darn rough? Well, it looks so bad because I was working with a friend of mine at the time who was going to paint the Kia, and I was going to do some LS harness work for him, and some drama happened, and that didn't get done. So I kind of had started peeling the blue plastic off before, you know, he was going to paint it, and then when the drama went down, it was after I'd already started peeling it off. So now it's basically just all stripped down now. I used a pressure washer to get all the plastic dip off because it was a nightmare, and found that underneath that plastic dip was some body work that needs to be taken care of. It's pretty rough, which sucks, but it's not through the steel, it's all surface rust, so that shouldn't be too big of a problem. I had fixed a spot in here before on both sides, and I don't know, it just didn't seal it. I don't know, moisture got right from behind or through the plastic dip or something. That's kind of mostly it, I think, that I can think of. I have to get a battery for it because this battery is fried. It does not charge anymore or hold a charge. So I'm going to throw a battery in it, and then we'll make another video and have you know, start it. And maybe if you guys have any questions, you can post those up and I'll answer those questions. The reason I haven't messed with the Kia in a while is because I've been driving the 240, which is a car I've wanted since this came out. It's a 95, so I was like 15, 16 at the time when this came out, and I always loved these cars since then. I finally got a chance to get one. It's got an SR20 DET and a bunch of other stuff, and we'll cover that soon because, as you see, the hood's open because I had some problems with one of the gaskets. It actually blew a gasket, turbo to manifold one, and it has a Tomy manifold on it, and the Tomy manifold actually cracked. And I called them, and they sent me another one under warranty, so we're gonna get that thrown on there, and maybe I'll make a video for that one too.